Al Clemens. Welcome to Mutant Learning, the evolving fundamentals of online learning, or in this case, a review for what I've learned so far in HE 547. I want to spend my reflection on this course in the context of my favorite comic strip of all time, the X-Men, which of course been popularized by movies in the last few years, and in particular Xavier's School for Gifted youngsters. For this overview, I'm going to discuss the 5 fundamental things I thought were significant for me to learn about while I was in this course, and how I was able to grow as a mutant, someone who's being changed in the process. And they are, of course, that online learning isn't like traditional learning at all. That as an instructor, I have to learn to use every available platform out there to me, but to use them effectively. And then my engagement as an instructor with learners is going to be critical to their learning journey. And that there are multiple tools available for me to use. And then, of course, that adult learners will thrive if the environment I build as an educator is stimulating to them. Let's take a look at the first one. Online learning isn't like traditional learning, and one of the key, most significant differentiations between online and traditional learning is the absence of nonverbal communication in the online world. And in the absence of that communication, we have to find a way to communicate in a way to compensate for that, and frequent inactivity with our students is part of that process. And we see that through many examples, including how we facilitate assignments. Now, Professor Xavier had a unique way of communicating even non-verbally to his students. He used mental telepathy. We don't have that tool, so we've got to be able to use frequent interactivity to communicate with them. As a second part of this, I thought it was important as an instructor to learn how to effectively use available platforms. So a lot of platforms out there, and they're all may be effective in terms of their use, but to be able to use them effectively is a different thing altogether. And that means you got to design courses built around the specific needs and tailor those course designs around the needs of every individual learner, and they're all different. Now, Professor Xavier had a unique capability of using a very sophisticated platform, what he referred to as the danger room, a holograph room where he could transition the entire environment around them in a virtual reality setting to train his X-Men. It's a pretty sophisticated platform, but he used it pretty well, and that's what we have to do, is to take the platforms we have, even if they're simple or sophisticated, and use them well. In addition, interactive engagement is critical. As an instructor, every move we make, every turn we make, is having an impact of some kind on all of our learners. Sometimes if you move one direction that's helpful for one learner, it becomes less helpful for another learner. So understanding your learners, knowing what makes them tick, what motivates them towards being a good learner or having some sense of motivation or relevance to the material, is all done through interactive engagement. Professor Xavier was able to do that because, as you see in this picture, no matter what his X-Men are doing and how they're interacting with the environment around them, he is at the center point. That's his face in the dead center of this graphic here. He is always with them, interacting in some form or another to help them learn how to deal with the environment around them. And then, of course, while there are tools out there, there are many tools we can use. And so understanding the construct of instructional tools and what they do for a specific learner or a group of learners and how that meets a learner's needs is part of our job. It's not just having tools that are all out there, but as we said earlier, to be effective in the use of them. And in the early ages of the X-Men, Professor Xavier used this form of a danger room. Now, I show this in comparison or in contrast to the one I showed previously because of how rudimentary this particular one used. Even in his early stages, he had to use the tools available to him to help train his X-Men. And that's what we have to do. We have to use the tools that are available to us and tailor them to meet the needs of our learners. And then finally, we know that as adult educators, as we would hope to see even in an in-resident environment, particularly true in an online environment, we've got to build stimulating environments for them to create learning spaces that make them effective so they feel like they're part of learning, they own the learning, and the learner is the center of all those possible learning spaces in their world. Professor Xavier knew how to help his learners grow so that they could be effective in the environment they were in. They could learn in any environment they were, even to the point where at some point when they could graduate, they no longer needed him. They had become self-regulated learners. And so for me, as I review this, I'm really struck by the idea of the degree of engagement that Professor Xavier had with his X-Men to grow them into adult, self-regulated learners. And so in summary, we know that online learning isn't like traditional learning. Instructors have to learn how to use every available platform that's out there for them. Their interactive engagement is critical. And there are many tools that can be used, and find the right ones that work for different learners is significant in tailoring learning for the learner. And that adult learners thrive in stimulating environments, and that's our job, is to build a stimulating environment for them. And I've been stimulated through this environment, and I think that has made me a better online learner and an educator.